I'm Gilmher Crows, and for the longest time, I believed I was invisible in my own family. From the outside, we looked like any regular middle-class household tucked away in a quiet suburb. Dad, David Mitchell, worked in insurance. Mom, Sarah, was a stay-at-home expert in child psychology, or at least, she thought she was. Their obsession with early learning and child development bordered on fanatical. I'm talking piles of parenting books in every room, color-coded flashcards on the fridge, and audio tapes about cognitive milestones playing in the car on our way to the grocery store. I remember one evening when I was just 3, Mom was hunched over the kitchen table, waving flashcards in my face, trying to get me to count dots and identify colors. Dad, watching from the doorway, sighed. "Sarah, don't you think we're overdoing it a bit?" he asked gently. But Mom didn't flinch. "These are crucial developmental years, David. The books say we have to start early if we want to unlock her full potential." The thing is, despite all that, I turned out average. I sat up, crawled, walked, talked, right on time, not a minute early. I didn't read by 2. I didn't multiply by 4. I was just a regular kid. But instead of accepting me as I was, my parents treated me like their failed science experiment. Everything changed when Jessica came along. I was 3 when my baby sister was born, and suddenly the house transformed into some kind of genius factory. By then, Mom had doubled down. She'd taken workshops and parenting seminars and talked nonstop about neuroplasticity and sensory development. I remember standing by Jessica's crib, watching her sleep, while Mom whispered to Dad about all the potential she saw in her. The difference in treatment was impossible to ignore. While I had soft toys and fairy tale books, Jessica got baby puzzles and sensory kits designed by child psychologists. While I was praised for being cute, she was celebrated for being advanced. And every time she met a milestone, walking early, speaking in full sentences, identifying shapes, there was clapping and cheering like she'd won a Nobel Prize. Thank God for Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa Peter. They lived just a few blocks away, and their home was the only place where I felt like I mattered. They loved Jessica and me equally, always treating us with kindness and warmth. I can still picture one Sunday afternoon so clearly. I was about 5, nestled on Grandma's lap with Jessica sitting nearby. Grandma was reading us stories and feeding us cookies. "Both of my granddaughters are perfect just the way they are," she'd say with a smile. But Mom hated it. She'd purse her lips and mutter under her breath about rewarding mediocrity. One time at dinner, Grandma gently told her, "Sarah, kids need love, not pressure. They're not science experiments." Dad jumped in, defending Mom. "You don't understand, Mom. Jessica has real potential. We have to nurture it." And there I sat, barely touching my food, already knowing what they thought of me. I was the warm-up act, the rough draft, the one they didn't get quite right. School was okay for me. I wasn't a straight-A student, but I wasn't struggling either. I had friends, played outside, did my homework. My report cards were filled with B's and a few A's, and I was proud of that. But my parents, they barely looked at them. Then Jessica started school, but not at the local public school like me. No, Mom had different plans. One evening at dinner, she dropped the news like it was the announcement of the century. "We've enrolled Jessica in the Wellington Academy for Gifted Children," she said, beaming. "They were so impressed with her test scores. They rarely accept students her age." I almost choked on my milk. Wellington was that exclusive private school with a campus that looked like a college and tuition that cost more than our car. It didn't stop there. Every time Jessica threw a fit about homework or got overwhelmed, Mom and Dad would just throw more money at the problem. "I don't want to do math today," Jessica would whine. "Well, if you finish your assignment, we can go get that doll you wanted," Mom would reply sweetly. Jessica caught on fast. Soon she was bargaining for iPads and designer shoes in exchange for doing her homework or getting a decent grade. Meanwhile, I sat at the kitchen table doing my work alone. No praise, no incentives, no bribes, just quiet. Once I poured my heart into a science project. I made a solar system model, spent weeks researching and building it. I got the highest grade in class. When I showed it to Mom, she barely looked up. "That's nice, honey," she said, before launching into a rant about Jessica's latest accomplishment. Then came the day that broke me. I had just finished decorating my room. It was the bigger of the 2 kids' rooms, filled with posters of my favorite bands, fairy lights, and framed pictures with my friends. It was my space, my only space. One evening, Jessica stormed into the living room. "I want Gilmer's room," she announced. "Mine's too small for all my things in my study area." I looked up, stunned. Surely Mom and Dad would shut that down, right? Wrong. "You know, that makes sense," Dad said, nodding slowly. "Jessica has a lot of learning tools," Mom added. "No," I said quickly. "That's my room. I've had it since I was little." But the next day while I was at school, they moved all my stuff into Jessica's smaller room. I came home to find her settled in my old bed, her new desk already set up where mine had been. I stood there, tears spilling down my cheeks. "This is so unfair," I cried. "Life isn't fair, Gilmer," Mom said coldly. "Don't be selfish." I slammed the door to my new room, the tiny one with barely enough space to stretch out, and collapsed onto the bed. That night, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I understood something I'd never admitted to myself before. In this house, I would always come second. And maybe second didn't even count. As high school rolled in, I tried to keep my head down and focus on the future. I wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. I just wanted out. I poured myself into researching colleges, writing essays, and dreaming about building a life where I wasn't constantly in someone's shadow. I knew I wasn't Ivy League material, and honestly, I didn't care. I wanted to study business at a solid state university. I wanted to work, to build something of my own, to matter. So when my grandparents came over one Sunday for Mom's traditional roast dinner, I was eager to finally share my plans. Jessica, of course, was in the middle of bragging about her latest achievement, some advanced placement thing that Mom had probably enrolled her in before she could even spell calculus. But Grandma Eleanor, bless her heart, turned to me with that warm smile and said, "Gilmer, sweetheart, tell us about your college plans." I sat up straighter, heart thudding in my chest. "I've been looking at state universities," I said. "There's this great business program at—" "Oh, about that," Mom interrupted, setting her fork down with a loud clink. "We've been meaning to talk to you." I froze. "We won't be able to help with your college tuition," she said, just like that, like she was commenting on the weather. "We need to focus our financial resources on Jessica. Ivy League schools don't come cheap." Silence fell over the table. Even the roast seemed to go cold. "You can't be serious," Grandpa Peter finally said, his voice trembling with disbelief. "What about Gilmer's future?" Mom sighed as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Look, Jessica is gifted. She's got real potential. Gilmer can take some community college classes or find a job and work her way through." I sat there stunned, my dreams crumbling in slow motion. All those nights staying up to study, the applications, the scholarships I was trying to earn, none of it mattered. Dad chimed in, his tone sharper. "Let's not kid ourselves here. Gilmer's never shown any exceptional talents. We're just being realistic." I couldn't take it. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Tears blurred my vision as I ran to my room. I didn't even bother closing the door. I just fell onto my bed, fists clenched, trying to stop the flood inside me. Everything I had done, every quiet effort to earn their love or pride, was worth nothing. 15 minutes later, I heard a soft knock. "Gilmer, can I come in, sweetheart?" Grandma's voice. I didn't answer, but she stepped in anyway. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hand rubbing soothing circles on my back, just like when I was little. "Your grandfather and I have made a decision," she said gently. "We're going to pay for your college. All of it." I sat up slowly, blinking. "What? That's too much money." "Nonsense," she smiled, brushing a tear from my cheek. "You've worked hard. You deserve an education just as much, maybe more, than anyone else in this family." And in that moment, something shifted. I stopped needing my parents' approval. I realized I wasn't invisible. I had people who believed in me. And more importantly, I was starting to believe in myself. College changed everything. Away from the comparisons and judgments, I finally had the space to grow. I enrolled in the business program and discovered a knack for analyzing trends and building investment strategies. My professors saw something in me, something my parents never had. Every weekend, I called Grandma and Grandpa to update them on my classes, my internships, my goals. My parents? I hadn't heard a word from them since I left for school. And honestly, that was fine with me. Then came the phone call that flipped everything upside down. "You won't believe what's happening with Jessica," Grandma said one evening, her voice laced with worry. She's gone completely off the rails. Apparently, Jessica had gotten into Princeton, and Mom and Dad were over the moon. But once she got there, without their constant supervision, things unraveled fast. She started skipping classes, partying all night, and dating every guy who paid her the slightest attention. The dean's office sent a warning letter. Grandma whispered. "Jessica's barely attending classes. When she does show up, she's hungover or late." "What are Mom and Dad doing about it?" I asked, not even sure why I still cared. "Oh, they've tried everything. Cut off her allowance, promised her a new car if she brought her grades up, even flew out there to beg her to get it together, but she just laughs it off." The irony was thick. After a lifetime of being handed everything, Jessica didn't know how to cope without the safety net, and my parents, so determined to create a genius, had created someone completely unprepared for real life. A month later, Grandma called again. "Well, it finally happened," she said. Jessica had been kicked out of Princeton, failed nearly every class, racked up more infractions than they could excuse. My parents were devastated. Jessica, meanwhile, moved back home like nothing had happened. According to Grandpa, she spent her days sleeping till noon, partying at night, and turning the house into her personal hotel. "She told your father that work was beneath her," Grandpa said with a bitter laugh. And me, I was thriving. I graduated near the top of my class and landed a job as a junior investment analyst at Meridian Financial, one of the most respected firms in our area. Grandma and Grandpa insisted I stay with them while I got settled. I didn't argue. Their house had always felt like home anyway. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. I was at the grocery store trying to decide between 2 brands of organic tomatoes when I heard that familiar voice. "Gilmer, is that really you?" I turned to see them. My parents. Older, more fragile-looking than I remembered. Mom clutched her cart like it was holding her up. Dad's face was drawn, his eyes tired. "We've missed you so much," Dad said, his voice strangely soft. "You should come over for dinner sometime," Mom added quickly. I hesitated. Every part of me screamed to walk away, but curiosity won. "Sure," I said. "When?" The dinner was surreal. The same dining table, the same beige wallpaper with the fading floral pattern, but everything felt off. Like I was walking into a stage play where I no longer belonged. They had cleaned everything meticulously, maybe trying to pretend like the past hadn't happened. Mom made her famous roast again, just like old times, and Dad opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. But I knew the real reason for all the smiles. "We heard about your job at Meridian," Mom said between bites. "Investment analyst. That's just amazing, sweetheart." Dad chimed in. "James Wilson told me they only hire the best and brightest. You must be doing something right." I nodded politely, murmuring a thank you. Across the table, Jessica sat stiffly, chewing her salad like it had personally offended her. I could tell she hated every second of this. She had recently quit another job, retail this time. 3rd one that year. Every job, every small attempt at independence lasted a few months before she found something wrong with it. Too boring, too demanding. Not fulfilling enough. Classic Jessica. I went to a few more dinners over the next couple of years. Not regularly, just enough to keep the peace. I maintained a careful distance, cordial, detached. Meanwhile, I was rising at Meridian like a rocket. I loved the work. I was good at it. My strategies worked. Clients trusted me. Promotions came quickly. Jessica, on the other hand, stayed parked at home. She'd try things, waitressing, temp office jobs, but always ended up back in the same place. She spent her days watching reality shows and scrolling Instagram, waiting for someone else to give her purpose. Then came the day that flipped everything again. It was a family dinner. Mom had gone all out. Fine china, crystal glasses, linen napkins. I should have known something was up. Right before dessert, Jessica burst through the door, arm in arm with a man who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of GQ. "Everyone," she beamed, "this is Charles." Charles was tall, clean-cut, and wearing a suit that screamed money. He shook hands politely and talked about his family's real estate business. Dad leaned in, eating it up. Mom couldn't stop smiling. And Jessica? She sat there shooting me smug glances like she'd won some silent competition. "I bet you didn't expect me to find someone before you, Miss Career Woman," she said with a smirk during dinner. I shrugged, unfazed. "Glad you're happy," I replied, spooning potatoes onto my plate. I didn't care about her games anymore. I had nothing to prove. But my parents were giddy. They whispered to me in the kitchen, eyes shining. "Isn't it wonderful?" Mom said. "Charles comes from such a good family. Jessica's finally found her path to success." "Success?" I wanted to laugh. Since when did dating a rich man count as success? Still, I let it go. I didn't come to fight. I'd built a life I was proud of. Then came my big break. It was during a quiet week at Meridian. I was reviewing one of our major investment portfolios when something felt off. The numbers didn't add up. Most analysts had missed it, hidden in plain sight. But the risk levels were spiraling, and if left unchecked, could cost millions. I stayed up 3 nights straight analyzing data, building a plan, and writing a report. Then I called an emergency meeting. I walked them through my findings, how I'd spotted the errors, how we could restructure the portfolio, and how that could turn potential disaster into opportunity. Mr. Davidson, the CEO, was stunned. "This is remarkable," he said. "How did you catch this?" I told him the truth. I looked deeper because I had to. I've always had to. Within 6 months, my strategy paid off. The portfolio outperformed projections. Clients were ecstatic. I followed up by designing a new investment algorithm that predicted emerging markets before our competitors even noticed them. Then, one Friday morning, Mr. Davidson called me into the boardroom. "We're creating a new position," he said, "investment director, and we want you to take it." I could barely breathe. It was a leap up the ladder, years' worth of promotions all in one moment. I called Grandma and Grandpa first. They cried. Grandpa opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for something big. Then I told my parents at the next dinner. They were shocked, then excited, then obsessive. "You have to celebrate this," Mom declared. "You should throw a party." "I was thinking something small," I said. "Maybe reserve a private room at La Maison." "No, no," Mom said, waving her hand. "Have it here. We'll help. It'll be special." I hesitated, but she seemed genuinely excited, so I agreed. Over the next week, I wired her money for decorations, food, and drinks. She kept me updated with cheerful phone calls. It was the first time in years I felt like maybe, just maybe, they were proud of me. The night of the party, I wore my favorite black dress and the pearl necklace Grandma had given me at graduation. The house was stunning. Flowers everywhere, candlelight, the aroma of perfectly catered food. I smiled, feeling for once like this was my night. Until it wasn't. Once everyone had arrived, I stood up with my champagne glass, ready to make a short speech. "I'd like to thank you all for coming." "Oh, sweetie, let me," Mom said, springing up with an overly dramatic flourish. My stomach dropped. "We're gathered here today," she began, "to celebrate a wonderful occasion. Jessica and Charles are engaged." Gasps, cheers, champagne toasts. Jessica lifted her hand, flashing a ring the size of a marble. Charles smiled awkwardly beside her, and I just stood there, frozen. This wasn't real. This was my celebration, my achievement, my money. Hijacked, like I never existed. I sat back down, my heart pounding in my ears. Around me, everyone beamed and clapped. Even Grandma looked surprised, but happy. Then I realized why. They didn't know. They thought this was an engagement party all along. I stood slowly. My father gripped my wrist under the table, his smile tight. "Don't make a scene," he hissed. "If you ruin this, we'll cut you off completely. No inheritance, no family, nothing." I pulled my hand free. "No," I said aloud. "Everyone needs to know the truth." The room went silent. "This party," I said clearly, "was supposed to celebrate my promotion. I'm now the investment director at Meridian Financial. I paid for this entire event. The food, the decorations, everything." Gasps, whispers. "That's not true!" Mom shouted, her voice trembling. "Gilmer, stop this nonsense!" "Aunt Susan," I said calmly, "can you read the invitation you got?" She dug into her purse, confused, pulled out the card. It says, "Join us in celebrating the engagement of Jessica Mitchell and Charles Aldridge." Charles stood up, frowning. "You told me this was a family dinner. You never mentioned this was someone else's celebration." Jessica's face drained of color. "Charles, baby, I can explain." "No," he said. "I've seen enough. This engagement is off. I won't be part of a family that does this." Jessica's shriek was almost inhuman. "You ruined everything!" she screamed at me. "You're just jealous!" I laughed. "Jealous? I'm an investment director. I don't need to trap someone into loving me." Dad stood. "That's it. You're no longer part of this family. Consider yourself disinherited." "Fine by me," I said. But before I could walk away, Grandpa stood too. "Actually, David," he said firmly, "your inheritance won't matter much. Eleanor and I have already changed our will. Everything we own is going to Gilmer." The room erupted into chaos. My mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest like she couldn't breathe. "What do you mean everything is going to Gilmer?" Grandma's voice was calm but firm. "Exactly what he said. We've seen how you treated him all these years. We watched you elevate Jessica while ignoring your firstborn." "You played favorites," Grandpa added. "You never thought Gilmer was worth investing in, and yet look at what he's done, what he's built, without your help." Mom opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Jessica was already halfway up the stairs in tears, and Charles had walked out the front door without so much as a goodbye. I stood there, in the middle of the dining room, my hands trembling slightly but my chin high. The family members who were still present didn't know what to do. Some slipped away quietly. Others came up to me with hesitant smiles, murmuring their congratulations or apologies. I didn't care, I was done. I picked up my purse, walked to the door, and paused. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces. "Goodbye," I said simply, then stepped into the night. That was 3 years ago. I haven't spoken to my parents since that evening. Jessica still lives at home from what I've heard, bitter, aimless, and perpetually disappointed that life didn't hand her everything the way she expected. I blocked my parents' numbers, and I haven't once regretted it. But my grandparents, they remain my rock. Every Sunday, without fail, I have dinner with Grandma and Grandpa. We laugh, talk about life, and they listen to my stories from work like it's the most fascinating thing in the world. They've supported me every step of the way. When I was promoted to senior director at Meridian, Grandpa popped open another bottle of champagne. When I bought my first house, Grandma cried as she planted rose bushes in the front yard. They never made me feel like second best. Last week, I stood in front of the boardroom at Meridian Financial, older, wiser, and more grounded than I ever thought possible, as the CEO of the entire firm, the youngest in its history. Me, the girl who wasn't exceptional, the one told to just get a job, the so-called ordinary one. When I called Grandma and Grandpa to tell them, I could barely get the words out. Grandma burst into tears. Grandpa let out a cheer so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "To authenticity," he toasted later that night, raising a glass in our backyard. "To finding your own path," Grandma added, her voice thick with emotion. We clinked our glasses together and I smiled. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. Not because I'd earned a title, not because I proved anyone wrong, but because I finally believed in myself. No more comparisons, no more needing approval from the wrong people. Just me doing what I love, surrounded by those who love me exactly as I am. That's the life I built, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.